Take a look at these terrible cards. Okay, sure, they all do something amazing for free in our upkeep, like casting spells from an opponent's hand, or giving us impulse draw and potentially a creature and potentially a treasure, or puts a creature from our hand directly into play. But they only do it once. If only there was a way to make them better. Enter cards that give you additional upkeeps. The Ninth Doctor, who gives you an additional upkeep step if he becomes untapped during your untap step. The classic enchantment paradox, Haze. The Sphinx of the Second Sun, who gives you a whole other beginning phase at the beginning of your post-combat phase. The living metal side of Cyclonus the Saboteur, who upon dealing combat damage will also give you an additional beginning phase. That's an additional untap, upkeep, and draw. And pair Clara Oswald as the Ninth Doctor's companion, and she sees the Doctor's additional upkeep trigger and has it trigger an additional time. That's more upkeeps, more value, and that's an MTG Specs guarantee. Hi, I'm MTG Specs, the guy who looked through 1,233 cards on Scryfall with the word upkeep in them, so you didn't have to. If you like that level of detail and you like creative takes on 100 card piles, maybe you'd like to subscribe to the channel. Today I'm going to give you 3 different deck lists. Number 1 is going to be exploring the courts of enchantments and the monarchy. Number 2 is speed running around the Undercity, courtesy of the initiative mechanic. And number 3 is a token army swarm. But the one thing all these decks have in common is that getting a free action or a free resource during your upkeep puts us ahead of our opponents. However, if we get a free action or a free resource multiple times because we've secured multiple upkeeps, that's absolutely backbreaking. The Ninth Doctor and a chosen companion are a key part of 3-colour upkeep builds, but we're doing WUBRG today by utilising the 14th Doctor, who is every colour but black, and then choosing the Doctor's companion Clara Oswald for him, who can choose to be black. This means we can use classic WUBRG cycles of creatures and enchantments that reference upkeeps. When the 14th Doctor enters, you reveal the top 14 cards of your library, putting all Doctor cards revealed this way into your graveyard, and the 14th Doctor can become a copy of one of those. We carry tutors to make sure that the 9th Doctor is on the top of the library when the 14th is cast, including an Entomb, which works as the 14th reads a copy of a Doctor card in your graveyard that was put there from your library this turn. It doesn't just have to be milled. You could of course just use tutors to find the 9th Doctor and then tutor him to the field. Green does that well. You could put him to the top of your library and then cast him next turn. As we are all about multiple upkeeps, let's make multiple Doctors. Quantum Misalignment potentially gets us 2 more creatures that grant upkeeps, as does the various versions of Sakashima, a Spark Double, and Eredica's Vile Duplication, which adds evasion with flying, meaning we can safely tap a copied 9th Doctor. Which is important because we don't get our multiple upkeep steps with the 9th Doctor unless he untaps at the beginning of our untap step. We can use him to crew vehicles with added utility like Unlicensed Hearse, which hits graveyards, Clown Car, which adds clown bodies to the field, and High Speed Hover Bike, which can tap the 9th Doctor at flash speed for a surprise upkeep. Paradise Mantle, Relic of Legends, and Cryptic Rite lets tap him to add mana, and from the file that reads "What does that card do?" is Archery Training, an aura with an upkeep trigger, turning the 9th into an effective deterrent to would-be attackers and blockers, and Quicksilver Dagger, which deals 1 damage and draws us a card. Holdout Settlement and Survivor's Encampment also provide us with a tap to fix mana, a boon in a multicolour deck. The draw in these decks is upkeep focused, with my favourite pick, Forgotten Creation, letting you churn through your deck to find cards, fill your yard, and it's a May ability so you can stop at any point in your multiple upkeeps. Keen Duelist is a risky include but fun to drop in the late game with multiple revealed cards. Patient Rebuilding shines when you can have an opponent mill 3 multiple times, netting you a ton of cards. Bonehorde Dracosaur is dumb value on its own without netting you multiple impulse draws and more Dino tokens and treasure than you could possibly need. Then we have Phyrexian Arena, that's multiple card draws in multiple upkeeps for a little loss of life, and Mind Unbound, which reads, at the beginning of your upkeep, put a lore counter on Mind Unbound, then draw a card for each lore counter on Mind Unbound. Multiple upkeeps, multiple lore counters, multiple card draw. Jacob Hawken Inspector stores away cards in exile before transforming in the late game to Hawken's Insight, with an upkeep trigger of exiling the top of the library and once per turn opportunity to cast an exiled card for free. Our final stop before exploring deck number 1 is Chronomantic Escape. Cast this to stop combat heading in your direction, exile it with 3 time counters on it, recast once each counter is removed during your next 3 upkeeps. Or will it be recast next turn because you've got multiple upkeeps? No one will be able to attack you ever again. On to deck 1, Courts and the Monarchy. First, we are playing all 10 courts, and when viewed through the lens of multiple upkeeps, they are nuts. If we retain the Monarch, Court of Cunning mills opponents in multiples of 10 for each upkeep we have. Court of Grace fills the skies with an armada of angels. Court of Ambition strips hands or takes life in multiples of 6. Court of Ire is doming opponents in multiples of 7. Court of Vantress is copying our courts, making things exponentially worse. Imagine making 2 more copies of Court of Cunning per turn because you just have 1 extra upkeep. That's 60 cards being milled. Court of Garenbrig adds counters to creatures and then doubles them for each instance of upkeep we have. That's going to result in some very large angels, courtesy of Court of Grace. And if we lose the Monarch, we have 12 cards that give it to us when we cast them. Queen Marchesa and Skyline Despot are 2 of these, the Queen swamping the board with hasty Death Touch assassins if we should lose the Monarchy, and Skyline sending dragons into the skies to join our angels. Things can get out of hand quick in this deck, especially when we can copy our permanents, including the Paradox Haze in our deck, giving out upkeeps, or an overperforming court. I've included Invasion of Fura as a board wipe, and Marchesa is on the reverse and has a card draw upkeep trigger once the siege has been won. You can never have too much Marchesa. Finally, a Starfield of Nyx returns enchantments to the battlefield as an upkeep trigger and acts as a win con, turning courts into creatures. This is the deck that will snowball out of control once we have our engine running. Speaking of running, let's run some laps around the Undercity courtesy of the initiative mechanic. We are going to be looping the Undercity and then using the last room in that dungeon to put creatures, which have upkeep triggers, from our deck into play for free. I said earlier that free actions and resources in Magic are OP, and nowhere is this exemplified further than the initiative mechanic. It tutors lands, it makes treasures, it draws us cards, it scries, it even puts a creature from the top 10 cards of our library into play free, puts 3+1/+1 counters on it, and gives it hexproof. Once you gain the initiative, you move into the next room during your upkeep, and if we can set up multiple upkeeps, we can run around the Undercity multiple times a turn. We even re-enter it if we complete the Undercity and still have the initiative. These cards let us take the initiative when they're cast, but they also reward us for speedrunning the Undercity. Caves of Chaos Adventurer allows us to exile the top card of our library when it attacks, and if we've completed a dungeon, we can play that card this turn without paying its mana cost. Tomb of Horrors Adventurer copies our second spell each turn, and if we've completed a dungeon, we copy that spell twice instead. And White Plume Adventurer, at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, untaps a creature we control. If we've completed a dungeon, we untap all creatures we control instead. And that final room that lets us put creatures from the top 10 cards of our library is hoping to find members of the Bringers cycle, -1. Let's meet the Bringers in order of most useful to the one I haven't included. Our number 1 Bringer is the Bringer of the Black Dawn. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can pay 2 life, and if we do that, we search our library for a card, shuffle the library, and put the card on top. In at number 2 is Bringer of the Blue Dawn, which draws us 2 cards at the beginning of our upkeep. Bringer of the Red Dawn is in our 3rd place. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can untap target creature and gain control of it until the end of turn. Our 4th Bringer is the Bringer of the Green Dawn. At the beginning of our upkeep, we can put a 3/3 green beast creature token into play. We are not including the Bringer of the White Dawn. In this deck list, there's only 8 artifacts, and the Bringer of the White Dawn brings back an artifact card from our graveyard to play during the upkeep. Instead of having that White Bringer, we're going to cross our fingers for one of these upkeep all-stars. Dominus of Fealty, who steals 1 permanent per upkeep until end of turn. Rassilon, the War President, who gives us 1 impulse draw per upkeep. And exiled cards we cast have Conspire, or Rhea Dawnbringer, who fishes 1 body per upkeep out of the yard to the field. Of course, you could go for Edish Norns, Void Winnowers and Jingataxises, but I wanted to keep with the upkeep flavour. On to deck 3, our Token Army Swarm. We're concentrating on creatures that have upkeep triggers that create tokens, and then we put cards into our deck that allow us to tap those tokens to cast even more creatures with upkeep triggers, and then we swarm the board for the win. Tendershoot Dryad, Illustrious Wanderglyph and Creekwood Liege pump out the tokens in our upkeeps. Creekwood makes the worms he creates bigger, and the saprolings that Tendershoot Dryad produces. Coma, Cosmos Serpent makes 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens, and our multiple upkeeps will keep him in fodder for shutting down activated abilities and protecting himself. A trio of wolf creating cards synergize well together, with Wolfcaller's Howl creating X 2/2 green wolves, where X is the number of opponents with 4 or more cards in their hand, multiplied by the number of upkeeps we have secured. Those wolves join the Hollowhenge Overlord's spawn of 1 wolf per wolves we already control, and Master of the Wild Hunt offering a wolf token per upkeep before he loads the wolf cannon and fires the pack at a target creature. I'm sure you can see how this can get out of hand. 2 other cards to spotlight: Infernal Genesis, milling cards and creating minion tokens based on the mana value of the milled card, except we get to do it multiple times, making sure we have the most minions to master. Rite of the Raging Storm, which puts players at odds with each other but also gives us multiples of 5 power per upkeep to launch at our opponents. And what do we do with all these token creatures? We give them the ability to tap for mana. Cryptolith Rite, Elven Chorus and Inga and Isika are all here to turn tokens into mana dorks. And here are some thrown away ideas that might inspire your own multiple upkeeps deck list. The alternative win con you could never pull off with Azor's Elocutus is now way more within reach. Chaos ensues when creatures and spells are being put into play or cast without the expenditure of mana, using the upkeep triggers of Game Preserve and Wild Evocation. The Sanctuary cycle asks you to think about your density of different colour permanents for upkeep effects, and a Sanctuary looks particularly nasty if you have a blue and black permanent granting +5 power to a creature per upkeep. Galvanoth lets you cast high mana value multiple instants and sources for free from top of your library during your upkeep. Time to get those scroll racks and Sensei's Divining Tops out of your binder. Descent into Avernus gives treasures and deals damage, exponentially increasing, and probably wasn't built with multiple upkeeps in mind. Kill everyone now, not later. Play opponent's spells with Centriplets and Xanathar Guild Kingpin. Opponents will not be looking forward to your 3 upkeeps. The decks I've shared with you today have a similar power level to another deck that I built on the channel only this week, which is the Celestial Toymaker mini games, which seems right as they are mortal enemies. You might like to check that out. Today's video was a significant amount of research and I loved every single minute of it. And if you enjoyed this humble free content, a like and subscribe would mean the world to me. My next video is my top 20 cards of 2023, but until then, I have been Lee and this has been MTG Specs.